Okay, Christy, can you hear us okay? Hi, Dana.
Hi.
All right, we can hear you. So I had to restart the system there and kick everybody out. And then one more piece. I'm gonna need, did everybody get the discussion points for the SDC conversation? No.
Was it on the table?
No, I don't think it was.
Okay, well, then I didn't get it.
Yeah. So you can take notes, ask questions. Okay. Looks like we're ready to go.
January 8th, Gerhart City Council work sessions now in order. All right, John. SDC.
So as the city of Gerhart is looking for different ways to continue making sure that its funding is meeting its expenditures, we need to continue to talk about ways to put money into our reserve accounts, increase our revenue. And one way we're looking at that today again is for the rescue services. We're working on the new ordinances that have to do with being able to get some insurance money back from some of the accidents and things that we do. We've raised our water rates and we intend to look at raising our water rates again during the budget process for this year. The one thing that has been kind of hanging out there for a long time that we haven't accomplished is system development charges. To give you an idea of where Gerhart is at, I've shared this with a few of you, but Gerhart has an incredibly low tax rate in comparison to other cities in Oregon. This is a list of all the cities in Oregon and their tax rates. And here's a little synopsis about this. The city's tax rate is $1.98 per thousand. That includes our $1.50 for our general fund, our permanent rate. You have that. You have that. And if you'd like to find Gerhart in that list, it is on the third to the last page. I highlighted it. In the yellow column are all the different cities' taxes in Oregon. Those taxes include the permanent rate for these cities. They also include their levies and the general obligation bonds. So when you get back to the page that Gerhart is on, you'll see $1.98. That includes our $1.50 and our about, you do the math, 97.5 cents per thousand for general obligation bonds. According to that list, or excuse me, 98 cents per thousand for the two general obligation bonds. Those two bonds, one of them is going to be coming off in March of 2025. So the taxes will be reduced to the city of Gerhart residents after that bond is paid off in March. And that reduction is approximately 45 cents per thousand. And then the bond after that will be 2031. I believe that's correct. March again, and then the second bond will drop off the city of Gerhart, leaving us only with our permanent tax rates, as we do not have any other general obligation bonds. We don't have any private loans out, and we don't have any other loan types out. So that leaves Gerhart with $1.50. And if you look, and I'm not saying that, you know, we need to increase our tax rates. But I think that what people should know is that Gearhart has been extremely efficient to do its work with the money that we have coming in. Taxes that come into the city of Gearhart raise just about $700,000 to the city of Gearhart. The rest of our funds come in through various ways, whether that be grants, fees from bringing in money from the Rural Fire Protection District to provide them with fire service. Charter and Pacific Power and all that pay the city to use our city right of ways for their service. But I just want to give you an idea that, you know, we receive less taxes than about 81% of the rest of Oregon cities. That comparison also, not to throw anybody under the bus necessarily, but if you look at our entire revenue, which is how much in the our P&L, our profit and loss, what's our revenue for the year entirely for the general fund? So I'm jumping ahead a little bit here.
2.9, you mean budgeted?
Yeah.
2.9.
So 2.9 million is what we do here in Gearhart, and that includes police, fire, public works, city administration, court, planning, all of those things. Just for reference, you know, to use something that's similar, I suppose, if you look at the Cannon Beach Rural Fire Protection District budget, just the fire for the Rural Fire Protection District budget, which does take care of their unincorporated areas and the city of Cannon Beach, similar to the way that we take care of the city of Gearhart plus our Rural Fire Protection District. The Cannon Beach revenue that they got for funding every year, or this last year, was a total of 4.7 million. We run off of 2.1 for the entire city. Cannon Beach Fire runs off 4.7 million. Yes, ma'am.
Are business taxes paid to the city included in this 700K or?
The only business tax that we have is really when you look at our business licensing. That we charge people, that's it. We don't receive any other business taxes. It's all property tax.
Does Cannon Beach get business taxes?
They transient rental tax is a large portion of what they bring in, but even just on property taxes, they're above 2.5 million just to operate their fire station.
They also have a sales tax on food.
Which is about $800,000 a year for them. So Gearhart's, again, very efficient, but it is starting to catch up with us. Expenses have grown incredibly. Our revenues have not. So this conversation about system development charges is probably a little late, but we can still, moving forward, we would like to consider these. Peter has prepared to talk about how system development charges. I provided you with a little synopsis of what we're going to talk about tonight. And then Peter will work down that, and you're welcome to take some notes from it. But I would say that we've almost been too efficient over the years and not raised our rates as fast as we needed to over the last 15 or 20 years in Gearhart. So it's time that we have these conversations in order to stay solvent. Also, according to the League of Oregon Cities, and I think Dana was there and so was Carrie, I think it was about 47% of Oregon cities are actually starting to operate in a deficit. 46% of all those cities that are in there. Now you'll see.
Wait, does that mean they're spending more than they're paying?
Yes.
How can you do that?
Well, they have reserves, they have funds. They will begin to have to start cutting services.
Or raise taxes.
Or raise taxes or raise fees. We're not in a dissimilar boat. We're getting close. It's getting more and more difficult to operate as we have been. Again, we've got, I think 13 full-time employees here. Again, just for reference, so does the Cannon Beach Fire Department. We operate a city on half the budget with about as many people. They have twice as much budget and the same amount of people just to do the same type of work. I'm not trying to compare us to them. They're fortunate as they have a lot of tax money coming in through short-term vacation rentals. We don't have a lot of those options. But Peter is here to talk about how we can get through this process and take a look at it, and then the city council can make a decision in the future about collecting some of these SDCs to help us with some of the larger projects. And again, tonight in the regular council meeting, we're also going to be talking about our water investment fund. Our water investments. And so that'll be a topic on there as well, but you've read a little bit about that and what we have coming into the city of Gerhart or coming up to start paying for. And so we're gonna have to continue to save money. With that, Peter, you wanted to carry on with this?
Sure, so and just adding one thing to the issue of the fixed tax rates, which in Oregon is virtually impossible for us to increase. So we would, if we were to seek more funds, it would be through a levy or another voter approved fee is what we would need to do, because moving our fixed rate is not something that could happen. If you look at the cities that have a lower fixed rate than us, almost all of them are kind of vacation spots for the most part. So like Detroit City, I mean, that's Detroit Lake. So again, those areas have a large amount of transient lodging tax, and that usually makes up for the real estate or property taxes that they're not collecting. But moving into something that a lot of cities utilize, and a lot of cities that I've represented over the years utilize the system development charges. Once upon a time, it was the federal and state government that really paid for infrastructure. So whether that was highways or roads or water, those were paid for by a combination of federal and state funds as well as permit fees. Which is kind of the model that we use. The way that we've collected money through the years is based on permit fees. Is that federal and state money kind of dried up? And the other issue is that kind of infrastructure, so those pipes and other things got older. The permit fees paid off, new permits were not enough to keep up with kind of the backlog of projects, which is why cities started doing what's called system development charges. Conceptually, that is that growth will pay for itself. So I'll use a water pipe as an example, because this is something I've seen in other jurisdictions. It may be that when the city originally did its piping, it had a 15-inch pipe or 18-inch pipe. That was sufficient for all the current users, and that was sufficient for increased use over time. And there reaches a point where you're out of pipe capacity because you have enough users pulling water that there's no more room in the pipe. And so what happens at that point is you have to repipe the system, or you have to declare a moratorium on the road, which is a very technical process involving state agencies that takes a long time and then requires us to engineer solutions to those issues in a period of usually 2 years. So the idea with system development charges is that current growth will pay for itself and for future growth. So if we're collecting water SDCs and putting them in a dedicated account, which means they can only be spent on those sort of water projects going forward, at the point where we would need to do a repipe, or at the point where we need to seek additional water rights or things like that, it's not just upon the new users coming in or the current ratepayers that are getting their rates raised. Because we would have collected these system development charges over time, we would be able to pay for those projects as they come online. So the areas where we most often see SDCs are transportation system development charges, park system development charges, water. We don't have sewer here, but that's often one as well. And the idea is when we have a master plan, whether it's a parks master plan or water master plan, that we calculate the current cost and the future cost, and then we have, it doesn't have to be an economist, but it generally is an economist, goes through and determines, okay, in order to pay for these future projects, this is how much per housing unit or for a commercial unit will need to be collected. And there is no, going down to the second point of number one, there is no fixed legal framework per se for how to calculate SDCs in Oregon. So there has to be a correlation between the future plans and the future growth in the amounts charged. But as far as like requiring a city to follow a certain calculation, that's not required. So, but what we do need to have, much like any other exactions, is we have to have a nexus between what we're trying to do and what we're collecting. So for a water SDCs, it could only be used for water projects. A parks SDC could only be used for parks. Transportation SDC, you have a little more flexibility. That could be roads, that could be sidewalks, because there's a recognition of multimodal projects. So if someone has sidewalks, they might walk instead of taking a car. Things of that nature. They can be fixed costs, but they can't be like ongoing services. So an SDC couldn't pay for a bus line, but it could pay for a road. Like if we were to add a lane capacity, we wouldn't do this, would be the state, but if they were to add a lane on the highway, that's something that SDCs could help pay for theoretically, if that's part of our transportation system plan. The current SDC rates, we don't have any. What we've done is we've collected fees at the time of development, and we've charged the costs of inspections and things of that nature. Normally, if a city's looking to increase the SDCs or otherwise adjust the SDCs, one of the things that they'll look at is what other jurisdictions in the county or area that are similarly sized or situated are charging. Again, there's a huge difference in SDCs among different cities in Oregon. I think the last time I looked, Westland's total SDCs were something like $60,000 a unit. Some cities have a high water SDC just because they have immediate needs that are happening, like a city of Aurora, which is in Marion County. They have some major water issues they're having to deal with. So the last I heard, their water rates were going up significantly, and so are their system development charges. So as they continue growing and need more capacity, those future users will pay for it. There isn't, builders oftentimes will look at SDCs as a package. So they'll say like, okay, this jurisdiction has total system development charges of $18,000 per dwelling versus this jurisdiction has $60,000 per dwelling. That can impact the type of dwelling that they build because they have to recapture their costs. So that's something that a lot of councils that I've worked with have balanced. So we all want housing affordability. We want places for workforce housing. And yet if our SDCs become a barrier to growth or a barrier to building, then ultimately the people that will bear the cost of that are the end home buyers. Because the builder is gonna build and their goal is to make a profit like any other business. And they're gonna look at their lot size. They're going to look, and this is just, again, jurisdictions I've worked in, they look at the cost per lot, they look at the SDCs. In a lot of cities, it's not uncommon that a finished lot would be 200 grand. In a city like Westland where the SDCs are 60, that means they're $260,000 in before they're even in the ground. So the only way for them to then make a profit is frankly to build a larger square footage house. Because if you look at what houses are selling for, if your costs for the lot are fixed and your SDCs are fixed, then you might be able to make a profit for a 3,600 square foot house, but you're not gonna be able to make a profit for a 2,800 square foot house. That's gonna result in a 4,000 square foot house. Because again, they need that house to appraise so that whoever the end buyer is able to get a mortgage. So as we're looking at all of these things, oftentimes people look at SDCs in a vacuum, but we have to understand these play a role in housing affordability and other things. So it's important that we're able to provide services for current residents and future residents, but there's some balancing that I always recommend that councils use. There's one other legal concern outside of the recent US Supreme Court case, and that's Goal 10, which requires a variety of housing options in Oregon. Years ago, I can't remember, was it the late 80s or the early 90s, but Thousand Friends of Oregon actually brought a case against the city of Lake Oswego. At that point, Lake Oswego's SDCs were something like 15 or 20,000. Now they're probably between 50,000 and 60,000. And the legal argument was that having these SDCs impacted the ability to develop Goal 10 housing. And it's kind of what I discussed earlier, which is you have to look at lot costs, you have to look at the SDCs, you have to look at all these components, and then see how that impacts housing affordability. Ultimately, Lake Oswego prevailed. I think it was at the Court of Appeals level. But again, those SDCs that they were charging at that time are a fraction of what jurisdictions are charging right now. So it is possible that there could be in the future a case related to SDCs and whether those negatively impact our ability to deliver our Goal 10 requirements. There is a US Supreme Court case that I've mentioned before. In that case, it was a California county. They were charging a $40,000 transportation SDC for a double wide trailer home. Their methodology was completely lacking. Like how they got to that 40,000 number, I'm not sure. And neither was the Supreme Court, because in their ruling, which I think was 8-1, though it might have been 9-0, they basically said, how can you possibly find that the two cars that are leaving this home are increased, like would need to pay 40,000, like that their impact on the system is $40,000. And that's why any SDCs that we pass need to be in line with our master plans, and they need to be calculated with plenty of public process, hearings and other things to allow developers, residents, the home builders association sometimes will come in depending on how those look in order to be heard. And you know, sometimes that will end in a more accurate or more fair or equitable charges. That's kind of the hope. In Oregon, jurisdictions have a pretty wide latitude in how they calculate the SDCs. And so it makes them, if you were to try to challenge them legally through the state system, it would be pretty difficult. The case where I thought they might have a chance was Portland's Park SDCs. Like it was kind of the smaller the residence, the lower the park SDCs. And if you think about like a studio apartment, those are probably people more likely to use a park, particularly if they have a pet, than somebody with a large yard. So that was challenged, but ultimately Portland prevailed, at which point I thought, well, we have a fair amount of flexibility with SDCs, though. Again, you know, my legal advice to anyone would be to kind of look at this through a comprehensive lens to determine what's fair and to make sure that our plans are things that are likely to happen. and that this capacity is something that we need. If we bring in kind of the outside experts to calculate the cost of our plans, and then to allocate what the SDCs will be on, future housing units, you know, that they will mathematically demonstrate their rates and methodologies. They'll look at the methodologies that other cities in the area have used, so to give us an idea of what those SDCs are and what other people looked at. The latest issue I've seen come up with SDCs has been with accessory dwelling units or ADUs, whether the government should charge SDCs of those ADUs or not. Recently, there have been some governments who have not charged SDCs to ADUs. I think that leaves them really vulnerable to a legal challenge, because like if you look at a duplex as compared to an ADU, duplexes are usually a mirror image of each other. So there'll be two units, maybe 12,000 square feet each. Whereas a ADU, oftentimes the maximum size is a third of the other units. So you might have an 800 square foot ADU and you might have a 2,000 square foot dwelling. And if you think about the people's use of the system, I haven't really seen evidence that there's a direct correlation between the size of the housing unit and the amount of utilities or stress that they put on the system. It might be true for water if they have extensive landscaping and a large yard. I mean, that's something where we could see it, but as far as like water use, there isn't really a correlation. And so I'm really uncomfortable with that carve out for ADUs. If we're looking at SDCs, I think it's probably on a per unit basis. If we wanted to do some reduced things or exceptions for affordable housing, that's something we can look at. The other benefit of SDCs is that oftentimes people are required to like build a pipe to a certain size. But if we know that there is another development that could be coming down the road, we would ask them to build the pipe to a larger size, and then we could offer them what are called SDC credits. So if they're required to build to a 12-inch pipe, and in our request they build to an 18-inch pipe, then we can look at those costs and the installation, and then we can credit them money back. Some cities have been pretty aggressive in this, particularly cities with hills or high topography where it's taken a lot of pumping to get water up to a spot. So the first development has incurred those costs. And then in some of those jurisdictions, the developers just received X number of SDCs per unit. So like, in addition to the SDCs that they paid, they received 100 units worth, and they could sell those SDC credits to later in time developers. The benefit being that those developers would usually pay like 85 cents or 90 cents on the dollar. The first developer would recoup the costs. The downside for the city then is that the city wasn't selling any of those SDCs. So although they got all that infrastructure paid for on the front end, then there would be a period of time where they wouldn't get any of those funds. Those are good for 10 years, those SDC credits. So if they're not used within those 10 years, they generally go away. But that is one way that a city can kind of leverage this system in order to right size the building of infrastructure for future growth. Impact analysis, I've already talked about it a little bit. That's the effect on developers, on businesses, and on residents, as well as revenue projections and proposed changes. If SDCs are high enough, they absolutely impact the type of development that happens. Because again, if you have a fixed cost for a lot and you have a fixed cost for SDCs, the builder is going to have to build bigger in order to make a profit. And so that's part of the reason that, you know, post World War II, you see all these 12 and 1400, 1600 square foot houses that got built. And now houses that get built are 1400 or 1600 square feet. It's just because if builders were to build, the end product wouldn't appraise for a mortgage and they would lose money on the project, which is people say, well, why are builders building so big? It's in some respects because if they want to make a profit, they have to. But STCs can impact that type of development. As far as revenue projections for proposed changes, there comes a time where the SDCs can have a chilling impact because it just doesn't pencil for the developer anymore. If they're looking at the total cost, they're looking at what houses are selling for in the area. They're looking at interest rates, current interest rates versus projected interest rates. And, you know, is there a market for that house in this area becomes a question for them. Or there's a group called Oregon Solutions, which is all the different departments, goes visits with different jurisdictions, and I met with them a few months ago in Estacada, and we kind of took a tour because new houses in Estacada are selling for over $700,000, and you know, new development starting in the sixes, and that's not at 600, that's at like 680. So one of the people at the state agencies who were talking about water needs, sewer needs, other things said, well, can't you just up the SDCs? And it's like, well, yeah, we can, but is there a market for an $800,000 house in Estacada? And I don't know. So that's another thing that jurisdictions have to look at and balance is like, can you price yourself out of the housing market if you put, I'll refer to them as too many ornaments on the tree, because you have all these kind of desires for new parks. And you know, I sat through Westland's SCCs one time and they were talking about bike lane SCCs, and if you're familiar with the topography of Westland, which is extremely steep hills, and this is before the electric bikes, but you know, I may have leaned over and asked the city manager, like, who's living here, Greg Lamond, and I think I said it loud enough that it got picked up on the tape and nobody thought it was funny, but yeah, I mean, like my encouragement is that we look at like what's realistic. So you know, are our parks oversubscribed? Do we need new parks? You know, what would the uses for those parks be? You know, would they be kind of nature parks? Or would they be kind of athletic fields? These are all the things that, and then ongoing maintenance isn't part of these SDCs, but some parks require a lot more maintenance than others. So we'd have to kind of look at other portions of the budget of like, if we build this, how are we going to maintain it? And is this an amenity that people want? And that's why critical to this whole process is a public process that the public understand what we're trying to do. I mean, the good news is I think that, you know, that the public understands that inflation is higher than 3%. Our property tax increases are higher than, or capped at 3%. So in order to provide current levels of services, we're gonna need to use some tool, whether it's this one or whether it's a fee, or whether it's some sort of enhanced services via a public safety levy or something of that nature. How are we going to capture these costs so that we can provide these services in the future, knowing that inflation is happening faster than the 3%? So barring major changes in Oregon's property tax system, we're going to continue having these problems as far as coming up with enough money to maintain current services. Item 5, which is a capital improvement plan, that again is, we would take like our parks master plan, we would take our water master plan, transportation system plan. We would look at what worked for something like a transportation system plan. We would look at potential gas tax revenues. We would look at all the areas where we could potentially see some money, determine what percentage of future project is to serve the current population and what percentage of it is to serve future growth. That's how we would calculate it, and then it's not unusual for when one of these projects comes up. 45% of it would be SDC eligible. We would have to come up with the other money, whether that's state grants, whether it's general funds, or other gas tax. I mean, coming up with that percentage for, I'm gonna call it the local amount that would be due, because few of these things can be funded solely by SDCs. And again, you know, this is Chad's sheet that I'm working off of, but I really appreciate that he includes alignment with community goals and priorities. Because again, if some of the ugliest city council meetings that I've ever been in are when there were either large STC or large rate increases or a combination of both that people weren't prepared for. And so talking about these things and identifying this stuff in advance, I think is critically important to getting to a good outcome and bringing the community along with us so they understand what we're trying to do. The phrase development should pay for itself. Almost no one would disagree with that, but then when you actually get into the details of how that happens, that's where you start getting disagreement. And so that's when you see people saying, well, I get how we need this, this, and this, but none of the 200 houses that got built in the last 300 years or the last 3 years had to pay for this. So why are you putting this burden on these houses? And again, that's why, you know, we need a lot of community engagement, and we need to mathematically be able to demonstrate that up until about 3 years ago, inflation was lower than 3%. So our property tax increases were covering the combination of property tax increases and new construction fees were covering our ongoing expenses, and that allowed us to add staff and other people as we needed them. We're still, I mean, Chad compares us to Cannon Beach's fire department. We're a city in their fire department, but their budget was something like 9 times what ours was the last time I looked at it.
It's like 54.
It was like $54 million, and ours is around, I think around 5.
No.
Yeah, so we're really, you know, when we joke about like keeping stuff together with clothes hangers and duct tape, we're not really kidding. I mean, when you compare us to some of these other jurisdictions that have really leaned into short-term rentals and transient lodging taxes. And I would say that's completely changed the character of those cities. I mean, I used to visit Gerhardt a lot as a child, but we also visited Cannon Beach and we also visited Seaside. And I hadn't been to Cannon Beach in a while, and I was there maybe 2 summers ago, and I could not believe the number of houses with the short-term rental discs on them and the telephone numbers to call. And the fact that all their parking lots were full and people were parking on the sides of the roads in the grass and kind of riparian areas, it was unbelievable to me and completely changed the character of that place. And so as we're talking about these various tools, just an understanding of they all have collateral impacts. If we wanted to open up our short-term rentals, we could probably make a lot of revenue, but I don't know that that's something that our community wants, particularly when they see what that's done to other communities. And as we have people that are expressing interest in maybe annexing into the city because of the negative impacts associated with some of those short-term rentals and other stuff in the unincorporated county. So again, it's like trying to figure out how we can make do and get what we need, and also trying to figure out, all right, here's kind of the combination of fees. The one that really not keeping me up at night, but giving me pause for sure is the ambulance stuff and just the first responders, medical response, and making sure that people are able to get transported to where they need to be timely. So, I mean, that's the reason that, well, part of the reason we were looking at these fees for our fire department for non-Gerhart residents and non-fire district residents, and then that's kind of on the front burner as we try and figure out how we're gonna make sure that these services get provided going forward. Stakeholder feedback, that's always goal one for Oregon land use is people understanding what we're trying to do, people understanding why we're trying to do it, that if we don't do it in this manner, here are the other tools. What's going to be most palatable or what combination is going to be most palatable. More than any other jurisdiction that I've ever represented, we have issues with not having accurate information going out to people, where I'll get reactive phone calls from folks and they're like, what are you doing? Nothing. I don't know, what do you think I'm doing? And then I'll hear what they think we're doing, and it's not at all what I think we're doing or what the mayor thinks we're doing or what Chad thinks we're doing, because sometimes I call them and they're like, have you heard anything about this? And the answer is no. So I think, again, with this stakeholder feedback, it's just a matter of getting out in front of this, explaining some of these things like, you know, Cannon Beach's fire goes on the approximately same number of fire calls that we do. Here's their budget, is it 5.6 million?
Total 4.7.
Okay, 4.7. 4.7 million, I mean, that's a healthy budget, and we don't have that kind of budget. So how are ways that we can hopefully provide similar services? One of them is through our volunteers, but other ways, again, those beginning to charge fees for non-resident, non-district residents that are requiring our services, the tactical responses when hikers get lost or when they step onto the wrong thing and are caught up and need a rescue. All those are fees that we're gonna need to kind of recapture from insurance companies and other things. A lot of times the biggest concerns about SDCs are from developers. I've worked with the Home Builders Association on SDC issues. My experience with them is they've been really rational, like they get these issues. What they have a problem with are when cities are going for I'll call it like the Rolls Royce of SDCs. So when it's like far beyond what a community might want or need, or far beyond what has happened previously in the community. So if like we've always offered certain things, then the fact that we charge SDCs, continue to offer them, not surprising. If it's something we've never done before and suddenly we're just saying, oh, all of you guys need to pay for this because we want it. And they're kind of like, well, no one else had to pay for that and there's no one else in the city. That doesn't exist anywhere else in the city. What's your plan to fill in all the other gaps? And if we don't have one, then that's when they aren't particularly pleased. And they do a great job of mobilizing their people if they don't feel like they're being treated fairly. So they can be pretty vocal about it. But as far as the timeline, this is something that we're discussing. I'm working with other city managers in order to get kind of names of people that can kind of perform the calculations and go through this, so that hopefully if we go out for a request for proposals, we'll have robust bidding and have a variety of options and people that'll be able to point to Clatsop County specific, as well as kind of similarly situated cities, and really kind of point to our future needs and come up with the way to do that. Steve Donovan, who you guys have worked with before as far as water rates, he's someone in multiple jurisdictions that I've worked with that's helped come with SDCs as well. He's somebody that a lot of jurisdictions use, so, I don't know whether he would put in a bid or not, but, I can think of 4 or 5 qualified firms that I hope would be willing to assist us with this. And they could do a good job explaining it to the public. And then, key milestones and deadlines, these are legislative land use decisions, so we don't have a fixed timeline where we would need to do this. What I would say is we need to bring the community along with us. So, if people understand this immediately and they can understand why we need to do this and why this might be a better means of raising money than another fee or surcharge or whatever we want to call it, then it can be a period of months, like not even 6 months, it could be less than that. If we have to update some, whether it's the TSP or Park Master Plan or other things, in order to kind of capture what the community wants, it can take a little bit more time. And again, what I would say is like, if these are projects that are community priorities, that you have a lot of people behind them, that they understand that this is gonna make your art a more livable place, then generally SDCs can be a pretty popular means of getting there. It's part of the puzzle. If they aren't community priorities or things that people want, then people aren't gonna want them, whether they get paid by future development or by current development. So again, as we look at these plans and as people's desires as far as like what a parks look like, what are the offerings there, amenities change, it's just important to kind of make sure that those plans track with the community engagement and community needs. So this is something we could roll out. Certainly, I think we could do this probably by the end of this fiscal year. Though it might go into next fiscal year depending on participation of bidders. It's good to have some different options because people use different methodology and we want to be real comfortable with. We want to make sure you guys were comfortable with the methodology that was being used and the outcomes we were getting to. So this is one where it's not great to have one person bidding. We really would like 3 or 4. And probably in addition to doing all of our regular noticing and advertising, probably reach out to other communities and solicit who did their work and make sure that those people understand that we're looking to do something similar. So that's kind of the 49-minute SDC talk. If you guys have any questions.
I got a question. Just exactly how much developable property does Gerhard have?
Well, we don't think very much.
Okay, the only person I can think of is a developer in this city is Ritchie Development up here. I mean, of what you're talking about.
So
Everything, excuse me.
go ahead.
Every system that you're talking about here, the water systems, okay, those are already in. We've already supplied him with that. I can't think of, I've been here a long time. I can't think of anywhere in this city where we have a piece of property that we could put our finger on this that hasn't already been offered. The guy down there off of Gun Club Road, okay, the old Chisholm Apartments,
Mhm.
right? He's already got some services to him. Right? Ritchie Development already has services to them. The pieces of property across the highway there, they've already got services to them. So exactly what are we talking about here?
So
Future growth, where's future growth gonna go? How large do we want our city to be?
we're under state law, we're required to have a 20-year buildable lands inventory. we're working right now, and every other community in Clatsop counties as well, doing our buildable lands inventory and housing needs analysis. We've done what we did, similar to what we did last time, which is we've ground truthed our numbers. We don't have, to your point, and I agree with you 100%. We do not have many buildable lots in Gerhart at all. Particularly when you do things like remove the Weirhorn property, which is not going to subdivide, right?
Okay.
So when we have been approached by developers in the past, one of the, and I only usually am involved in SDCs when we're redoing the SDCs. So I didn't know that we didn't have SDCs until the cottages project came about. We are going for an additional water right. So we currently don't have enough capacity year round to serve what we have. It's possible that the buildable lands inventory will come back with the requirement that we add land to the city.
Okay, and what's the average price of a house in Europe right now?
So I think it's right around 770.
Yeah, okay. I mean, the people that are gonna buy here or build here, or anything like that. I mean, whatever system development's charging you. That's Mox next to them. If they wanna build in Gerhart, they've got the brass in order to be able to pay for it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good reason to charge the system development charges, because it's not a barrier to, it's not a barrier for these people to pay. Really where it gets tough is when you're in very modest means communities where those SPCs could make it so someone can't afford a house.
But we're not, that is not Gerhart. We have no low income housing or lots. The only low income thing is over at Chisholm's Apartments. That's it.
Well,
I mean, Johnson's built the one across the highway, across from the liquor store there. That's $2,100 a month.
right, so ultimately, if you guys don't want to adopt SDCs, you don't have to.
No,
Like,
I'm not saying let's not adopt them. I'm just saying if we're basing this thing here on an income revenue for the city of Gerhart, this isn't gonna do it. What I would rather talk to you about is how we get the tourist tax dollars reversed to where 80% goes to the municipalities and 80% goes to the tourist industry.
so 100% of our transient lodging taxes are our general fund. So that the limitation was the result of a compromise between the Oregon Restaurant and Lodging Association and cities. So if you had a transient lodging tax that predates, is it 94, Chad? Was it 94, 96?
It was near there.
Okay, in the 90s, the Oregon Restaurant and Lodging Association, which used to be two separate associations, noticed that these transient lodging taxes collected weren't being utilized for marketing to tourists. So they worked with the legislature, and what it was that any transient lodging tax post that date, so any increase of a transient lodging tax, the funds had to be dedicated with that 70-30. So when we added the transient lodging tax for the county at their request for the jail, the reason we didn't repeal and restate our tax, the reason that we had a separate tax is because our current tax is grandfathered in, and 100% of the revenue that we get off of that is going to our general fund. It's only that small percentage that help pay for the jail where we have to spend it on tourism stuff. But if you look at the definition of the tourism stuff, like it can, what I would refer to as a linger longer project, which would be something that mainly benefits residents, but also could make visitors wanna stay a little longer in Gerhart, those qualify. So we're not doing like a marketing campaign or hiring Wyoming Kennedy. And almost all of our funds are flowing into our general budget, not to marketing or tourism.
There isn't anywhere on the coast that tourists don't want to go or linger longer. Zero from Brookings, Oregon, all the way on up to Astoria. Why are we giving the restaurant and the tourist industry the money that should be coming for infrastructure for the people that come down here and stay in Gerhart or stay in Seaside and use their facilities? Why is it that it isn't reversed? The other thing that I want to ask is, we have no businesses in Gerhart, basically. You talk about Cannon Beach, they're loaded with businesses. Seaside's loaded with businesses. Warren's loaded with businesses. Astoria's loaded with businesses. There isn't one single city in Clapton County that is like Gerhart. We don't get any basically business money to facilitate us.
Oh yeah, I think that's by design. I mean, that's.
I don't know, downtown Gerhart's dead.
Peter, can I speak a little bit?
Sure.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah, because I think Preston has an excellent point, and I think the good news is that a lot of politicians across the state share his opinion, and League of Oregon Cities has heard that message so much so that I think Carrie can back me up on this, that this is every League of Oregon Cities meeting that you go to, this is a topic of discussion that everybody is feeling the same. And especially cities like Gerhart, which even though we get our transient tax because we did the right thing at the right time, around us, all of their money is working against us. Now we have a comprehensive plan that says we don't want tourists. That's we can't support tourism because we don't have enough law enforcement, we don't have enough firefighters, we don't have enough infrastructure for that. But the cities around us are working against us because their money is going to attract people, just like you said, to our city. So all of the cities across the state are saying exactly what you're saying. And it has become a topic of discussion at very high levels. And I think that you will see some movement on that. But it's
yeah,
not,
so
it's
if,
not
if,
that Peter control that. It's going to be a state thing that we're all going to have to lobby together to get it changed.
right, so part of the reason we haven't passed the supplemental transient lodging tax is because we would be required to use that high percentage to attract visitors, which is contrary to our comp plan. So if that requirement were to go away, if we were to then be able to use it, how we can use our current one, which is 100% of it goes into our general fund. So none of it has to go, other than the little prison thing. Then we could absolutely increase our transient lodging tax at that point. Though that would involve a public process to pay for infrastructure. And we're unique, a lot of other cities didn't have the local transient lodging tax. So they are stuck in that statutory scheme that you discussed where 30% of it can be used for general and 70% of it has to be used for tourism promotion. But we're not there, we're the opposite.
Can I just get a clarification? So are you saying we can't just raise our transient lodging tax by, let's just say, 10%?
Zero. Right.
Well, we could do it, but then we would only get 30% of that. We get 3% out of that 10, and then we'd have to use the 70%. And like, there are limits to how far we can stretch the definitions in order to comply with that 70%. There's some flexibility there in the definitions.
You know, I asked Givaldi to Astoria get together. he said, you know, it's gonna be a real heavy lift. The Hotel and Restaurant Association lobbyists are so strong in Salem that it's gonna take every single city to be complaining. Every single city in Oregon.
Well, that's one of the things about Government Day on the 28th. When we go to Salem, the LOC, League of Oregon Cities, is making a big push that every city that shows up goes and talks to their representative and their senator about this, getting it reversed. Because this is the year they want to do it. They feel there's enough pressure from all the cities that have gone to the LOC and said, we need to do something about this, and their lobbyists are working on that right now.
I mean, I hate to think what Joey up in Seaside has to do on any given weekend, with as busy as his fire department is, dealing with the tourists.
Right.
And
Well-
it's all supported by the taxpayers in the city, just like every time these guys here have to do something to an out of towner.
Right.
You know, we're paying for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that statute's like very vulnerable, actually. I mean, not to disagree with what you were told, but there have been a series of carve outs in that statutory scheme. One being a supplemental tax for Hayward Field. There have been a series of others. There's some ambiguity in there that there's 10% is kind of unallocated for right now because you have this travel Oregon having to do this regional program. I think that there's a lot of like if you look at the initial deal that was struck when it was struck back in the day, and then how that was written up in the statutes, there's a 10% gap there. And then there also is, again, we have inflation that's greater than 3%, and our property taxes are what they are. And if you look at a Sun River, then Central Oregon, the amount of money they're required to pay to promote the area to visitors that they don't want is tens of millions of dollars. So I mean, no disrespect to Orla, but I wouldn't be betting on him this session.
Okay, well, do we have any other questions for Peter? Because,
Please.
okay,
Are there other coastal Oregon towns that have SDCs in place that you're aware of? And do
Yeah.
you know what they're charging per unit?
We'll get that information for you next meeting. It's most of them. The ones that generally have them are the ones that have had rapid growth, and the ones that don't are the ones that have had not a lot of growth. But we can get you a list and we can get you what those amounts are.
I don't remember if it was Bay City or Pacific City, it's about $20,000. Seaside has them, Warrenton has them, and Beach has.
It'd be nice to see some comps involved.
Yeah, we'll make sure that we can do that as part of it.
I think, yeah.
And then this wouldn't be necessarily an ongoing revenue source. It also could be built in to help us with our reserve accounts, to take care of future projects we've been talking about here.
okay,
Like that was the main reason for it, to me.
well, revenue source.
Future projects.
Yes.
Well, I mean, building reserves, having how you started this.
I guess my only thing that I would add to this conversation is, for me, looking at this, I would want to know that the juice was worth the squeeze. I mean, if we're going to pay an outside expert to come in and work this, I mean, I need to know, to Preston's point, that the money that we would see returned on this would be enough to make it, to at least cover the cost of that and some of our projects. And so before I would say, yeah, let's run out and get an expert, that's what I would want to know. Because I think that this will also have a staff impact. And as we just talked about, our staff is already, they're busier than one-armed wallpaper hangers on a good day. So.
Okay. Any other questions or statements? All right, so let's end this work session.
Change seats. You're seeing?
All right. So. January 8th, 2025, city council meeting is called to order. I am going to read this little statement about something that happened to a family member. Today, thank you. As in Nashville, North Carolina, America has seen how the trajectory of many lives can be changed in a matter of minutes. The wildfires in Southern California have been devastating and the situation is ongoing. Last night, my nephew, Justin Smith, fled the Eaton Canyon fire in Altadena, California. He texted this morning that he was just barely made it out of his block with houses already burning on his street. The winds in his neighborhood were up to 90 miles an hour. This morning, he learned his house had burned and he texted a picture of his remaining chimney. What would we do without our first responders who are trained and regularly put their lives on the line? To be clear, a first responder is a person that responds in an emergency. The responder could be a firefighter, law enforcement officer, paramedic, or medical technician. We can be thankful as well that we live in America where first responders from other states travel to help those who are in need in other jurisdictions. I am thankful for our first responders who have done so. I am thankful for all they do, whether it is fighting a fire, helping someone on the beach, or simply assisting someone who has fallen and needs assistance getting up. Our first responders keep us safe and also save lives. We need to remember this. They deserve our support. And in closing, this is only one of the reasons I am putting forth my nomination for Dana Gold to become president of the Gerhardt City Council. Dana has experience in law enforcement as a city councilor and as a first responder. She is intelligent, ethical, hardworking, well-spoken, as we know, knowledgeable, and experienced. She will take the responsibility of president of the city council seriously, and she will not back down from the position. I am confident that Dana Gould will serve the city of Gerhardt well as our city council president and will represent the people of Gerhardt fairly in an unbiased way. And with that, that is my.
Who wrote that?
Who wrote that? Not me. I'm not that good. Good for you.
That was a nomination?
That was a nomination. That's the first thing for,
But I mean, who submitted that letter?
I did.
Well, you did.
Yeah.
It was written by your nephew?
No, my nephew,
His
Oh,
editor wrote it.
Gotcha.
which is my wife,
Yes, sir.
with input from Carrie. But it's not, this is not what I can do. I can be rough. And that's about as good as I get. Anyway, that is my nomination. Anyone else wishing to nominate can do so at this time. And then we'll move on to declaration of any conflict of interest after we vote. Yes,
I nominate Paulina.
Paulina?
I second that.
Hmm.
And here's my rationale on that. Number one, she has been a mayor. Number two, she has lived in this community for a very, very long time. Number three, she is very thoughtful, diligent, and measured in her decisions.
Okay.
So we had the first nomination. Did that die for lack of a motion? Okay. Second nomination. And a second? Bert?
I nominated, she seconded.
Okay.
Nomination.
There can't be another nomination. There's nobody to.
Can't be you. Making sure we have all bases covered.
Yeah. All right,
I call for a vote.
you call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Before.
Aye.
There's only one motion on the table.
Okay, sorry. Aye.
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 Congratulations.
Sounds like it's 4.
4-0-1.
Unanimous.
Unanimous, thank you, sir.
May I add something? Real quickly, I agree with everything that you said, and I agree with everything that you said about Dana. And her knowledge and her background is invaluable to us. And we're very lucky to have her.
Is there any declaration of conflict of interest?
No.
No. No? No? No. Okay. Okay, I'll take a motion for the regular meeting minutes.
Motion to approve.
Second,
Okay, any discussion? Is there any corrections or anything like that? None?
no,
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, passes. And I have to say something about the council president. You realize you will be a signatory on checks if necessary. Is that? Okay, thank you. I'm sorry I forgot that. As you said, I would forget, but I did remember. Okay, everyone, you've got a copy of the planning commission minutes. In your, somewhere, if you got them today or if you got them in,
I think they were left out of the original packet. They
yeah,
were
we just got them
posted,
on our desk, so I personally have not had time to read through this.
they were
Okay.
posted online, but they were not in the packet.
okay. So we don't do anything, we're just saying we got them. Mayor's report. There is a, let me see. There's a meeting coming up on next week, I believe, isn't it, Chad?
Yes, sir. Would you, let me update about the community meeting number 2,
Right.
January 14th at 6 p.m. There's going to be the program update is the building program summary. So talking about what goes into a fire station again. We're going to have a site update, which was talking about existing fire station structural evaluation, tsunami site evaluation, site assessment, which includes civil, environmental, operation, and constructability concerns. There's also going to be talk about a bit of a cost update of what things are kind of looking like in some of the benchmarks. Site and response planning, and we're also gonna 2 workshop activities. So the group who attends this meeting is going to help us with site and response planning, where they're gonna put together buildings on the site and try to help us through how that might work, and then rank priorities for the public safety building as well. So that is community meeting number 2, January 14th, 6 p.m.
Okay.
Can I say something? For everybody in the city of Gerhart, this is probably the most important meeting that they can attend. Because you're gonna have the structural engineer there to tell us what the current facility is all about. You're gonna have the geotech report as to what foundations and what the costs are. That's probably the largest cost that we're gonna have in a seismic zone, as to what sort of a foundation you're gonna have. So, you know, people are throwing around all these numbers, you know, on the interweb. This is gonna be a factual seminar. This is probably the most important for the police and the fire departments. That's the reason why things are gonna be what they're gonna be.
Good, thank you, Preston.
Do we
Okay.
worry about running out of room over there at the fire station or the?
Unfortunately, not yet. You know, we had about a total of 60 people that included some online. We've got 2 sides, but we'll keep working this site until it becomes untenable, and then we'll figure out where to go next.
All right,
Sounds like
Standing room only.
right,
free s'mores.
we got counselor reports. Preston, I guess you just gave yours, right? Or do you want another one?
No, this, I think that we've hired the right people to guide us through this, what it is that they're gonna bring. They're gonna bring evaluations for, you know, other projects that have been performed, have been built on the coast in the same type of situation. I certainly hope they don't bring the OHSU thing from Newport. I mean, those people have got unlimited funds.
Yeah, that thing is just a piece of garbage as far as I'm concerned.
Well, you know,
It just,
Hatfield wanted it there, so
yeah,
that's where it is. So, but anyway, you know, they're gonna bring in, you know, all the critical infrastructure, 4 or 5 different projects that are on the coast there, and what, you know, what they cost and what the challenges were, and it's gonna be very, very informative, I believe. And I've been in construction industry almost my whole life. So.
Yeah.
That's my report.
great. Alana,
I met with Chad and set up bi-weekly meetings with him just to help me increase my understanding of his priorities and our priorities and what's going on. Also met with Justine over some of the information that was in the report from Acuity having to do with our limited amount of in-house double checks, if you will, in the financials, and just to review all of the processes. And she also explains some about the internal controls that they do have between, say, a work process that Christie does one part and then Justine does the other. And that might be a work process that has to do with, you know, like the short-term rentals. One person brings in the money, the other person does the billing, so that there are cross checks and some of these as much as the staff can do. And it did give me some ideas of perhaps working through a little bit of looking at the whole packet when the checks are signed. Did that when you were gone for a period of time, and it really is insightful. So I might work that into what I do just a little bit, or if I have questions. CERT team did not meet at county level, would have been last night. And then, yeah, I've been wrestling with a lot of storm damage at my house. Neighbor's tree took out my son's car, totaled it. And we're still cleaning up that. And then I had a big spruce tree fall in the riparian zone, and it went across the Ecoxy Creek. You can see it from Gun Club Road. It's about, well, it's as far as my house, but it's about long walk up. So that's all I have in my report.
Thank you.
fish habitat.
Sharon.
Yes, a few things. I attended the Clatsop County Goals 16, 17, 18 meeting in December. One of the main takeaways from that, for me, was that they are trying and rewriting those goals to think about climate change and adapt the goals to climate change. And one thing that they are certain will happen with climate change is that the wetlands will migrate inland. So new wetlands will be created inland from the bodies of water. I thought that was very interesting. Secondly, I've been meeting with Chad and working with him on putting together some business information on our website for prospective new business people. We're using a template that's taken from Richland, Washington, which has an extensive business information site. So we're in process of that, and I have had numerous conversations with residents. And the two main subjects have been elk in Gerhardt and a few incidents that we've had recently with the elk, and also discussing the new tree ordinance.
That's it. Dana?
So yes, I signed up for the League of Oregon Cities Day in the Capitol, but I will not be able to attend the next small meetings in Scappoose on February 7th. If anybody's interested in attending that, now's the time to sign up for it. Did attend the planning meeting for the next public safety community meeting, and everything that was just said, I agree with. One of the things that I wanted to mention, however, that hasn't been covered so far is some of the information that I'm seeing come out online that should probably be corrected. Is that number one, no budget has been established. And I'm saying no budget has been established. We are still in the very, very early stages gathering information. We are nowhere close to having a budget. So anybody who's trying to do some calculations to find out what the final cost will be, we don't have the numbers to start from. And if you use bad numbers to start from, and then you underestimate how many taxpayers are going to be involved in sharing the cost, the numbers that you're going to get back are going to be very, very scary and not helpful. Wanted to reiterate what I think everybody on the council would say, that we are all taxpayers, and as taxpayers, none of us, nobody has any intention of spending a dime more than we have to, or creating a building that is more than what we need. Nobody's expecting a regional training center. I would like to clarify that currently the fire station uses that there's a break room attached to their kitchen area. I think everybody is somewhat familiar with it by now if you've been at the fire station. They use that area for meetings, to do classroom portion of training, and for other debriefings and briefings and other things that they need them for. The problem is that when we change this building, OSHA is not going to allow us to have that type of an environment in the break room. They're not going to allow us to use the break room for that, or it's not supposed to be designed for that. So there will probably, I anticipate, be a classroom, moderate size classroom. And that's all anybody has ever talked about. Nobody has talked about a regional training center. Another question that came up again is, why don't we just remodel the firehouse? The fire station, our fire station was built in 1958. Seasides was built, what, 20 years ago, Preston?
It might be less than that.
Okay, so they're remodeling that, a fairly modern building that was recently built and still meets their needs as appropriate. However, our building was built by to standards of 1958. It is already falling apart. It shakes in a hard storm. There is no way we would save money by trying to reinvent it or re-engineer it to modern standards, the seismic engineering that we're going to have to do. But even if we could, it was built for apparatus size in the equipment that was available in 1958. Since then, a lot of equipment's been added to apparatus. It's grown from being what I like to call the fun size, the small little kid size apparatus. It is now much larger, and we have to custom order at great expense our apparatus, and that may not always be an option for us. Looking to the future, we have to anticipate that that won't always be an option. But another reason why that's not a good idea is because it simply is not large enough to sustain the modern equipment that's going to be coming out. We will have harder and harder time achieving modern fire standards with the small equipment. So that's something to think about. And that is, I think, everything I needed to say about that. So I give it back.
Thank you. All right, we're gonna move on to city officer reports. Chief Josh.
Good evening. For stats, January stats are being worked on, or sorry, are in the works. So we will have those to you soon. I did do a look at last year's stats versus previous years. For case files, we ended 2024 with 591 case files. To give perspective, in 2023, we finished with 416. So it's 175 more cases that we have taken. In 2022, it was at 133, which was very low. And in 2021, it was also around 135. Those are just case files that we've taken. Our log entries, which I talked to you before about actionable items, these are stuff that were dispatched to or self-initiated that do not turn into case files. That number is at 694. So we have well over 1,000 actual items that the officers have been dealing with. When I say officers, I mean 3 guys have been dealing with. That also does not include with our contract with Clatsop County Sheriff's Office, what they have done within the city proper as well. I'm working on getting those numbers. I'll try to get those together as soon as I can. I say that to say, unfortunately, Gerhart Police Department's 3 officers are doing the work of many. As calls for service and activities rise, we will continue to feel the increasing effects of our current staffing level. So I just want to put that out there that we are working. 3 guys are doing the job of many. So just to let you know, I'm very proud of them. They're doing a really good job and a lot of hard work to keep Gerhart citizens safe. Just a last thing to note on, as we do in this society, we check social media sometimes and see things. There was a post about the Gerhart Police Department not working evenings. I wanted to dispel that myth. We absolutely are here in the evenings, sometimes into the wee hours of the morning, most nights into the early hours of the morning. We have our contract with the county that covers us when we're not on duty. And that could include vacations. You know, we don't live here. We have to have vacation and time away and recoup our brains, and we're not robots. So there are times when we do have county, but we're lucky to have them work with us. So just so everyone knows, we are here in the evenings and into the morning hours most nights. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Chief Enemy.
Hello, my turn. I have stats for you this time.
Oh, we don't want to come.
Last too bad, I know. So December was a really busy month for us. Inside the city, we got 45 calls. Inside the district, we had 33. We had 82 total calls for December. We sent aid 4 times. We had a structured fire in Seaside, a gas leak in Seaside, an MBA in Seaside, and an alarm activation in Seaside that needed extra manpower because they were busy on other calls. We received aid once when we do a 911 malfunction for Warrenton Power and MBA. So in December of 2023, we had 44 calls. December of 2024, we had 82. So you can see we have an exponential growth in calls. Last December of 2023, we ended at 744 calls. This year we ended at 759. So we were 15 calls ahead of last year. And I'm gonna caveat that into kind of an eye-opening experience. So Cannon Beach, we all know Cannon Beach, kind of a down south of us. They ran 770 calls we ran 759. So we're 11 shy of Cannon Beach that has 12 paid staff. And I'm talking fire marshal, fire chief, deputy chief, office administrator, 4 interns, and that's not including their part-time or their volunteer firefighters. So we as Gearhart are doing, especially Chief and I are doing the work of 12 paid chiefs and lieutenants and people that are functioning at Cannon Beach. And our volunteers are literally running the same amount of calls as Cannon Beach is running. Which I can see us exceeding next year, even though I lost a cheeseburger to Chad this year. One other thing that we wanted to talk about was the California fires. The reason we did not send a unit down there, which would have brought about $40,000 of income to our general fund and our fire department, was due to some of the issues we had on the last conflag, aka the citizens couldn't decide why we were sending resources outside, and with the public safety building being in a political uproar at this time, we decided it best not to send resources because it would have been myself or chief going on that conflag. So we had to make a tough decision on based off of feedback we had from the last conflag. So that is why we were not included in this task force. We just had to make a tough decision on keeping our citizens happy or giving aid. So we wanted you guys to be aware of that. It's an unfortunate, because we wanted to go, not only to help and go with our brethren, our family, and help the citizens of California, but we just felt it was politically unwise to make that decision. And then my last caveat is to back up on Dana, as we heard the rumors about the regional training center. I just want to clarify, there was a misnomer. It came from the mannequin grant that we had. The mannequin grant, if you'd like to see the regional training center, it's my office. There's mannequins in there. That's all it is. Basically, we just are sharing the mannequins with the county. We are not a regional training center. We're just sharing some of the grant that I got to better our area. That's all it is. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
You're a paramedic,
Yes,
correct?
ma'am.
Do we have a second paramedic now?
We have one that's an out-of-district volunteer that comes up and will stay at my house and he'll come run calls. He's a paramedic. We have one in school for his paramedic. He'll be done in July. And I have 6 that are going through EMT right now.
Thanks.
Yes. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
I think California's got enough firefighters down there that we don't need to send anybody to protect LA, okay?
That's fair. I was just letting you know.
Yeah, I know. I think it was a smart move.
Yeah, but I mean, there's extra stuff to that. There's the experience that the people get in going to something like that.
Yeah.
There's the back, I mean,
He ran out of water.
they ran out of water.
He ran out of water.
So the other thing too is every time that chief or I go on a conflag or our crews go on, even if chief and I don't go, there's a revenue to that. So yeah,
I'd
but
rather have you here.
that's totally acceptable. I was just laying out what the decision.
And I think it's hard to get it right in social media because someone put out there, I can't remember who it was, but they said, gee, I wonder if anybody from Gearhart's going. I
Yeah.
noticed Seaside and, you know, someplace Warrington or whatever it was.
Yeah. So we've already.
Yeah, it's like, so it's hard to get it right on social media.
It really is, yeah. We just wanted to address it because it was brought up on both ends, right? Why did you go? Why did you not go? So we figured we'd just tell the decision to you guys so that we were all on the same page.
And the upcoming town hall is also an issue. They wanted to be present for that and make sure it went smoothly. And then when they go, it's other people that have to cover them. And, those resources are tough.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Master of money, Justine.
So noteworthy this month in revenues is a receipt of $5,000 in 10-0027 grants. Which was the second round of ARPA funds that fire agencies received by the Clatsop County Board of Commissioners. They had originally given us $10,000 last year, which was carried forward to this year. And then they got an additional $5,000 this fiscal year. So a total of $15,000 that the county distributed out by intergovernmental agreement for ARPA funds. Also 10-0065, conflagration and mobilization. We got reimbursements on the telephone and service fires. I can't remember, but I'm thinking that we have received all reimbursements for the summer conflag disbursements that our firefighters attended. In expenditures, there was a payment in 10-1360 to the Gearhart Volunteer Fire Department for the firefighters' quarterly gas and clothing reimbursement. Also in fire, there were payments to satisfy the ARPA Clatsop County allocations. They purchased new equipment and uniforms. They had to have that money, just like we do for our water infrastructure. They had to have it allocated or spent by December 31st, and they have done that. So they had some purchases in the fire department. There was also grant purchases in the water reserve 717190, which included the purchase of a generator, a static mixer, hydrants, and water infrastructure supplies and materials. We have sent out purchase orders and have obligations for all of our ARPA funds. We haven't received everything yet, but we just had to have them obligated, but we will have all of that spent. And we report in April, but it had to be spent or obligated again by December 31st. There were increased expenditures in the 797900 public safety facility project, which included additional payments for the geotechnical work, and now we have an architectural support services on board, so we'll have more expenses in that fund starting to accumulate instead of just our project manager. So that's all I had for my finance report, but tagged onto the finance report is our credit rating. So that report is available online. If people want to see it, it's on the back of the finance report. And it is from Standards & Poor's. And so I'm just going to talk about it a little bit. First, just what is a credit rating, in case nobody knows. So the Standards & Poor's, or commonly referred to as S&P Global Credit Rating, is a credit score that describes the general credit worthiness of a city that issues debt. So it's basically your credit score. Ratings provide a common and transparent global language for investors to form a view on and compare the relative likelihood of whether or not the city can repay its debts on time or in full. It is completely informative and they are just opinions, but financial investors rely upon them really heavily. And we do have to post them on a federal website called EMA, so that investors can see it. And so when we go to sell bonds or make any types of investments, they do look at those reports and they see if they feel like we are creditworthy. What kind of just the timeline of how this all happened. So in September, S&P, which has rated all of our outstanding bonds before, rolled out a new set of ratings criteria across the United States. 436 issuers were placed what they call under criteria observation following the publication of the new US government methodology. And S&P forewarned in that for counties and municipalities, Expected changes are primarily due to changes in the factor weightings with less emphasis on economic factors and more emphasis on debt and liability than in the former criteria. So changing the criteria from one day to the next simply could change your rating. Not that anything you did differently as a city, just the way that they evaluated could make a difference based on the new methodology. So in October, Administrator Sweet and I met with Standards and Poor's and reviewed the city's information. They sent out a sheet, they want information on our data, they look at our audit, which they were delighted that it was already completed. Ask us questions, and then they take all that information and they prepare the report. So in December, Standards and Poor's released the final report, which is included in the council's packet and has been posted for all of our financial. We had to do it within 7 days of receiving it. And the credit highlights in that report are that S&P Global Ratings lowered its long-term rating and underlying rating on Gearhart, its general obligation debt 1 notch from an A plus. So we went down 1 and removed it from under criteria observation, which is a good thing because you don't want that out there. And that's just a thing that's saying that they were needed to possibly re-review us. So that's all. What does A mean? An obligator rated A has strong capacity to meet its financial commitments, but is somewhat more susceptible to the adverse effects of changes in circumstances and economic conditions that obligators in high rated categories. So compared to others, we have a little bit higher of a risk, so they felt like they needed to downscore us down to an A. An A is still in the strong category, but there is still 1 lower, A minus, before you move to B. So we're still in the strongest category. S&P said that our outlook is stable, which I completely agree with. And the rating action reflects the application of its criteria, methodology for rating US governments published September 9th on ratings districts. Specifically, the city's nominally thin reserves in smaller economic relative to higher rated peers. So that's the criteria why they downgraded us. Reserves, which also is our general fund, and economically related to our higher rated peers. Those were the 2 factors. The city of Gearhart does have dedicated reserve funds, and informally, because we don't have a formal council policy, targets to keep its ending fund balance at 10%. Those are our 2 goals. Many of our reserve funds are used like a savings account. So after years of saving, a large purchase is made. So we transfer little bits of money into that reserve fund, and then we buy a new vehicle or we purchase water infrastructure, things that are very expensive. But the revenue that makes up those funds are general fund transfers. So we transfer from our general fund in order to support those reserve funds, hoping that the general fund has enough money in order to do that. Because we do that, if general operating expenses continue to rise, of course, there's less revenue to transfer over there, which limits the growth of dedicated reserve funds. So we're only growing 3%, but our expenditures are growing at 4%. We don't have enough money to transfer over there to those reserve funds. And I think that's pretty clear based on our budget that we just don't have a lot of extra revenue sources to support large reserve funds at this point. We spend the money when we need it. The last few years, our general fund balance has been significantly higher than in years past, and we were very clear with S&P about that. Due to the ARPA funds that have been put in there, we didn't know at the time we got the money what exactly we were going to do with it. So we put some of that money into the general fund. And so it does appear that that general fund balance is inflated. It's carried over 700,000, and 230,000 of that was for water infrastructure. And not really a reserve fund, because we knew we were gonna have to spend the money December 30th. So it's going to decrease significantly. Also, the city must have an adequate ending fund balance to support general fund expenditures in the month of July through October before property tax and short-term rental tax revenue starts coming in. So we need that reserve, we need some reserve, an adequate reserve fund in the general fund, because we don't get property tax till November, but we still pay people and buy things July, August, September, October. But we are getting very little, if no, property tax until it starts coming in. So our ending fund balance in June supports us through those months. So we can't really drain it down to zero, even though legally you can. We need it to support that, so we don't have a negative balance for those months, because we can't do that. So with rising expenditure costs, it will be increasingly difficult for the city to maintain the targeted 10% general fund ending fund balance and support transfers to the reserve fund. Increasing reserve funds in a small rural community can be difficult because of limited revenue sources. So it's kind of similar themes that you've heard, and they pretty much write that up in there. And we didn't do anything financially alarming to them. They were very complimentary. They feel like we have a lot of great things. It's just that based on the new methodology and the new point system, they felt like they needed to downgrade.
Ideally, what percentage would they like us to have?
Well, I think commonly people like to see 10%.
But we have that, right?
We hope to have that, yes.
We're close.
Yes.
Okay, so their ideal is 10?
Well, globals, they would like, they didn't give us a percentage.
What do you think?
I bet they would like to see more like 25.
25%?
Well, yeah, because they downgraded us and our ending fund balance was $768,000, which is way over 10% of our general fund.
No, so we're less than half of what they'd like to see.
That's what yes. And they would like to say that because if something substantial happened in the months of July, August, like a terrible thing happened, you would have the money in the general fund in order to support it until you got your revenue from the property tax. They did not give us a number though. But I would just say, based on a $700,000 ending fund balance, that they, although they did know that we were gonna be transferring money out of there, I would say they would at least like to see that much.
And if we go below 10, where we are now, if we go below like approximately 10%, are we gonna get downgraded further?
Well, they know that we were going down and they put that in our review. So I think that if we proved we were economically maintaining that and not overexpending, we probably wouldn't, but.
And they did take away that criteria observation.
Yes, they did,
Criteria observation.
correct.
That's good.
Yes.
A little bit.
How often is this done?
They usually do it whenever you go out for a bond, and they don't usually do a criteria change unless you either go out again, which Chad and I had just done it when we went out for the last general obligation bond. And they wouldn't normally do it unless criteria had changed, or they felt like there was something significant.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. City attorney.
So I'm continuing to engage with Portland State Population Center over their population estimates. So we'll be chatting, I'll be working with Christy. And thank you, Chief Andy, for that information regarding fire calls, because one of the areas they're pushing back on us is what's called the vacancy rate. So how many of the houses are, I'm gonna say like the primary dwelling or domicile for people that are living here versus historically. And so the fact that we had such a high rate of calls in December speaks to the fact that we have people that are living here. And so they had estimated that our vacancy rate was 49%. So, anyway, that we'll need to get other evidence to refute that. And then they want it by February 15th, so we've got a little bit of time, but we want to get on that because it impacts all our state shared funds. And then the other thing that, you know, we're looking at, and I mentioned this during the work session, is our buildable lands inventory and housing needs analysis. So at this point, we feel like we have that pretty dialed in, and we're waiting to get those reports from 3J, which is the consulting company, and that'll show us where we are. Unfortunately, they don't just consider us, they also consider the other jurisdictions in Clatsop County. So our lack of potential we have some buildable land, but our lack of buildable land probably won't necessitate some sort of huge expansion, because we don't have very many areas where we could expand. We have a few, but pretty limited. And then I got some calls regarding dune vegetation, probably based on last meeting. I saw a pretty lengthy comment and correspondence. Just to reiterate, the entity that does those permits is the Oregon Parks Department. So that's who people apply for. That's where they get the permits. We're told the months they can mow. And that's traditionally been October, but I think this year got pushed in November, and it's going later because of fire season. So again, that's the state that makes those determinations. Yeah.
Are you still going to court?
We are, I want to say that I'm a bit optimistic that we might be able to work something out, but I think that it's possible that I will be in court, but I'm hoping that we're going to be able to resolve that. And I think we have kind of something that will meet our needs as far as demonstrating that we're taking our fire, health, life safety very seriously, while also trying to be less punitive. So we'll see whether that's something that will be agreeable to everyone. But for now, yes, but hopefully not.
Okay, Peter, I got a question then. That
Sure.
has nothing to do with what you've talked about so far.
Okay.
How long do I have to keep records?
So like related to city business?
Yes.
So my recommendation is you just hand them to staff, and then they keep changing the schedule. It depends on the type of, yeah, I know that they all love that was my response. But this is why that is my response. Because if people give staff their records as they come due, then our ability to accurately provide public records requests, responses is much higher. And then there isn't a burden on our elected saying yes or no. And sometimes it's not even obvious if something is a public record or not. So if it's an agenda and you're keeping notes other than how someone votes, I mean, if you're writing like a narrative, like, well, that's absurd, or why is that lawyer telling us that, or whatever it is, then that's gonna be a public record. And if it's just your agenda with nothing on it but check marks, then you can dispose of that. So if it relates to city business and it is, and it's not just papers that everyone receives, then yeah, if you could hand those over, that would be great.
All right, thanks a lot.
Yeah.
All right, anyone else with questions for Peter? Moving on. Chad.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. So we talked about the next town hall meeting. It's exciting. Planning Commission is working on the FEMA situation with flood zones, and so that's what we're going to be working on tomorrow during the planning commission meeting. And then in the future, we're gonna be talking about a 5,000 square foot C1 zone swap. Downtown, we have a reserved amount of C1 zone left over from when we made the Trails End Park a park. And so we have a business that's interested in picking up some of that 5,000 square feet to expand a little bit upon what they're doing. So keep an eye on us on that. I would like to say that during the last couple of little storms, they weren't so small. We really got hammered by trees being down. The storm was unique in that it came from the southeast and it came in microbursts. So we had a lot of tree damage. We're still trying to clean up the messes, and part of the reason for that is a lot of our tree trimmers that we hire as contractors gave their staff days off during the holidays, and yet they're starting to get rolled back in. We've only got one spot left over that we're still awaiting the cable company to come and take care of so that we can finish the job, but otherwise the town is in pretty good shape. We almost had a tree come down on the house that we had to take care of right away as an emergency. We had some damage at Ms. Blina's house, as we said, and a few others, but generally nobody was hurt. And I was very proud of the police, fire department in their response, and also in Miss Justine's work at the front desk, who's taking all the calls, all the information, taking that information, disseminating it out through the crew, especially while Christy was gone. And so she was also integral in the city's development. It was excellent. And so far so good. If there's any further issues or people see trees that are dangerous, please let us know and then we'll get on them as soon as possible. The public works folks are quite busy right now. They have, with Miss Justine's help, spent the ARPA funds, and that was just in good time because a lot of the things that just happened at the water treatment facility were unexpected, and those funds came in very handy to be able to handle those issues. Currently, what we're doing is we're doing water filter repairs, which is called pinning, which they pin little holes that are in the water filters. They do this every once in a while as part of a maintenance issue. They are also rebuilding and still working on the chlorine generator, but we are waiting on a tank from the manufacturer. I believe they're in California, and that wouldn't be an issue now. So we are awaiting that. The public works staff has been very busy on the big maintenance projects within the water treatment facility. Planning and administration has been busy. Things have not slowed down. Peter was talking about that we are now 49% have unoccupied homes. We're not sure that that's true, but it was about 5 years ago, we were 60% unoccupied. So we've seen a large group of people that have moved into town, and that is making everything a little bit busier, but we're getting through it. I have my first application under the tree ordinance, so that is working so far, and I've got another couple that are coming our way. So we're working through that, kind of working out a few bugs here and there, but so far so good. We talked about the S&P rating change. That is an interesting thing. We are still within the range of being in very good shape. And if we go for future general obligation bonds, I think we're still going to get very good rates based on our rating of A. But there are other rating agencies out there as well, such as Moody's, that we may choose to go through rather than S&P. But that we'll work that out with the help of some people that know a lot more than we do when it comes to that. The city council and I talked a little bit about taxes in Gearhart. I've got that tax information about all of Oregon, where the city of Gearhart lays in as far as what it taxes its citizens for the general fund and our water bonds. Thank you. We have 2 water bonds that provided our water treatment facility to us. One of those water bonds is dropping off March 2025. So there will be a savings in taxes to the citizens of Gearhart with that in mind. And then the second water bond will be dropping off in March of 2031. And so that will, with those 2 bonds dropping off, that will reduce taxes by about 98 cents per thousand on our residents. So that's something to look forward to. That's all I have for now. Yes, ma'am.
Are you gonna re-hook up the speed indicator?
Yeah, I just noticed that today, as a matter of fact, with the wires that are hanging down. I think those were removed when they had the tree come through it. So yes, we will. When, I'm not so sure. We'll get Pacific Powers up on that.
Okay, I walk that a lot, I do notice that when it comes on, if they're speeding, it is quite a pretty good deterrent. I noticed them, they put their brakes on, so it is helpful.
Yeah. And the, yes,
And I thought the sense of school was no longer there, that wasn't that for the schools?
used to blink at 20, I think they adjusted it to 25, so.
Put photo cameras out there, right?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, get them.
That's all that happens, man.
All right, thank you, John. All right. Justine, what's gonna happen with this, annual audit?
Well, hopefully Corey is up there, which it looks like she is. Hello.
Hello.
Hello?
So Acuity is our auditor. They've been our auditor for several years now. And they come and spend time with us and do an independent review of our financial data and send us a report and submit to the state. And Corey is here just to kind of give you the highlights.
Thank you, Justine. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm glad I'm tuned in to hear you talk about the rating change. General fund balance is something we watch really closely as auditors. One of the things we're required to ask management about, but also look at ourselves, is whether or not the city's going to be able to pay its bills for the next year. And so carryover fund balances for the general fund is one of the best indicators we have. And so that's just a really good discussion. I love hearing that happen. In an auditor's perfect world, we'd see 6 full months of operations in your general fund carryover. The rating agencies usually aren't as wishful thinking as we were, because I know it's a real balance trying to make sure you have enough versus providing services that meet your taxpayer needs, and juggling that is a big goal. So that touches on the general fund. One of the other big indicators we look at is the utility funds, and if they're generating cash from operations within your cash basis model. And the water fund provided about $175,000 worth of cash inflows to take care of other expenses. Overall, cash in the water fund increased about $315,000 last year. So that's a really good thing. That tells us that you guys are watching rates and making sure that the utility funds are taking care of themselves, which is the goal of having those broken out into their own funds. And then I have some what I call really good news. Oregon makes us look for things: budget compliance. Are you in compliance with your banking institutions? Did you get public contracting like you were supposed to? All those sorts of things. And this year we had no non-compliance with any of those. And so I just want to take a minute and say congratulations on that. That is a big accomplishment. There's a lot of moving parts in the city, as you all know. And so that's a really big deal. That's great. So good job on that. My next piece of good news is we didn't have any audit adjustments this year. That's good for 2 reasons. First, it means as a city council, the information that you're getting monthly and making decisions based off of, building budgets based off of, is accurate. And I think that's really, really important to know because it leads you to better decision making. So when you can rely on that financial data. So congratulations to Justine and the entire admin team for making sure that things were really, really well done financially this last year. And then my last piece of good news is we've worked Christy and Chad and just seen, since we came in, just making sure that the processes, the city councilor that addressed this already, that made me happy to hear too. Making sure that there was some more reconciliation happening between the different processes that were happening, since you're using different software to do, let's say, utility billing versus TRT versus, they're all in different pieces. And so making sure that what you were compiling into the main accounting system matched and reconciled back to the source data was something that for the last couple of years we've been really pushing staff hard on. And this year it was beautiful. I mean, there wasn't anything when we got in to do field work, everything was done and reconciled and cross-checked, and that was really nice to see it. It's again another reason why you're not having audit adjustments and why you're not having audit findings, because those things are happening. So congratulations again on that. So, that's about all I have. If anyone has questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Well, if we got good, good, and good,
Right.
it's good. And I like that. So,
As you should.
I think we all need to say a big thank you to our treasurer.
Yes, ma'am.
Hey,
master of money.
She's fabulous and nobody else can have her.
Great, thank you, Corey.
Thank
Of
you,
course.
Corey.
Thank you.
I hope to have you back next year saying the same thing again.
I would agree with that. I hope to be back saying the same thing.
Great. Well, thank you. All right, moving on, public communications, written and oral. Anyone wishing to address the city council concerning items of interest not on the agenda may do so at this time. All remarks will be limited to 5 minutes per person. Requests to comment electronically must be submitted by email to the city recorder at info@cityofgearhart.com no later than 4 p.m. the day of the meeting. In-person attendees wishing to speak are required to sign in prior to the meeting. So, has anyone signed up electronically? Has anyone got a raised hand?
No.
Okay, let's go through the, if I can find all of it. The written communication, which was, I take late, that's why it's not in our packet. There's a letter from Tim Mansell, there's a letter from, I don't know how to say that.
Pure energy.
Curie,
Rocky.
anyway, there's a,
Angela.
It's Angela Siddle.
Yeah, Angela Stidwell.
Thank you.
you can see that where,
That's
First pair.
out of the front area.
here.
great, thank you for that. And Deanna, you have a letter in here also,
Yes.
and what else we have? Another letter from Deanna. And I guess this is all yours,
Yes.
okay?
That was the one.
That's the one in the packet. All right. Oral comments. Gosh, I don't know how many we've got here, but it looks like Deanna, you're up first.
Okay, thank you. Deanna Mansell, 2945 Highway 101 North, Gerhart. I just wanted to tell you that I supplied this additional information to the city because I felt that the county was premature in voiding the easement agreement with the DEQ for the Turner's septic system, they were not supposed to do anything detrimental. And I included, in your packet, some surveys that were done, since 1986, and the latest one was 2009. And they very clearly show that there is a problem with the Turner's North property line. The Hollanders and Turners have a dispute of 12 feet of land, and CKI's survey shows that Turner's property hits the edge of the Hollanders building. And so on that basis, and I've dealt with surveying, with title insurance companies, my own legal issues. I know that when you have issues with your boundary survey, you have to resolve it with your neighbor. And if you don't resolve it with your neighbor, you complicate your piece of land. And so I thought that the Turners did not represent this information to the tax assessor's office. And they prematurely allowed this to happen. And so I'm providing you guys the information because I think the ball is in the city of Gerhardt's court to have the planning department review this information and see what the city can do. So that's why I provided this additional information. So that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Deanna. All right, I'm sorry, but I need to go back and say that, Dana, you forwarded Stuart Schultz's letter to the council in our, I'm sorry, I
Right.
missed that.
Yeah, so last month he had submitted that and somehow it didn't make it into the packet. So Chad asked me to forward it to him so that he could include it in this packet and make sure that it went on the public record.
Okay. Well, it has been looked at and is in the public record.
Would it be okay if I ask Peter just a quick question about Deanna's issue? It's just a jurisdictional question,
Yeah,
just to help her streamline, getting the answers that she's looking for. Do you believe that we are the right people to investigate what she's complaining about, or is this something that, are we going to be able, let's say she's right and the county did do something wrong, is that something we would be able to intervene on, or is that something that has to be dealt with through the county?
so when the county is processing a lot line adjustment, it's the county. They're generally applicable rules statewide, but each county has the ability to kind of have their own code scheme. The way that Clatsop County, because I looked into this, learned a lot about lot line adjustments. The way that Clatsop County does it is when someone makes a request, if it's creating multiple lots, there's a pretty robust process they go through. If it's combining lots, so 2 lots into 1, it's far less process. So they look at the underlying zoning. They provide notice to the property owners in the area. Those property owners have 14 days to object to the lot line adjustment, at which point it becomes final. As far as the other thing, the dispute between the two owners, if one's home is on the other one's line, I mean, that might be an adverse possession claim, but that would be a private private dispute between two neighbors. Is if the county in fact erred by doing this, it would be the county that would need to review that, because we don't. This is the type of thing that rolls down. So like federal to state, state to county, county to city. So like technically, if there had been a mistake within that 14-day period, it could have been taken to LUBA. By people that said the county had made a mistake, but the county is the one that could, to the extent that they did something wrong, they're the ones that would perhaps have the ability to do something about it. We don't, because we're on the we're downstream of the county as far as like preemption issues go. So if the neighbors were to do something else with their property, like a land use application that involved us, at that point, we could look at that and we might have some authority. But as far as a lot line adjustment that wasn't challenged, and maybe there was insufficient notice or something like that, I can't speak to any of that. But yeah, that's outside of our purview.
Thank you, Peter.
But what we can do is like write a letter to these neighbors about the issue, which is like the weeping willow, and say, hey, are you gonna take any action? And are you aware of this issue? And maybe put the burden on them to respond, because it doesn't seem like they've provided us with any information.
Historically, everything south of, say, F Street and everything east of the highway,
Yeah,
you can get 4 surveyors using the same hub, and you'll have 4 different pins. I mean, South Gearhart is notorious.
yeah, we had that issue come up, not related to this, but on another thing where we had surveyors coming up with dramatically different
Oh, yeah.
maps. And I was very surprised,
Yeah.
because normally whether it's a pin or some other marking, that everyone's moving off, everyone's going off the same thing. And again, this instance that Chad and I were involved in, which didn't relate to this, we had 2 people come up with, it couldn't have been any more different. So I certainly believe that.
I mean,
Yeah,
Can I speak to that, Preston? We've spent hours on this, and CKI and Ernie Davis and Tom Wagner basically agreed with the whole area. And so I'm not kidding when I say that there's a 12-foot gap between the Pacific Paint Store and Turner's. It's there, it's been verified by 3 different surveyors. And you can get Carl Festian or Hansford and Larson to do it, and you find the same information. But I thought that with 3 different surveys, and it basically says the same thing, you know. But as far as me getting notice from the county, as far as the Turners combining their tax plot, we did not receive any notice. I mean, if it was a land use thing, that, and I should have responded by 14 days, I got no letter from the county. But because it's in the city of Gearhart, the tax assessor's office has a little blurb saying that you combine your tax lots, you need to go to the city planning department. It didn't say you go to the county planning department, so I'm, you know, jurisdiction wise, I'm not sure where to go with this issue.
so I looked at the current scheme for doing this with the county. They revised it several years ago, and then I looked at the prior scheme that the county used. And again, this is a ministerial decision by the county. So the way that it worked is that people filed an application with the county. As I said, if they were creating multiple tax lots, that was a more robust process than when they were combining 2 lots into one. Which again, they look at the underlying zoning, they make sure it's got the minimum size. They have a whole checklist of things that the people need to provide, they need to provide it within 30 days of the initial application. After that 30 days, if they've provided all the documentation that the county needs, they deem it a complete application. There's a 14-day objection period, at which point the decision becomes final. There is no role for the city under that prior scheme. There are certain things that involve the city that don't involve us. One of them is CCNRs for homeowners associations. Those are reviewed by the county. We never see them, even though they're within the city of Gerhart. If we have special rules, we need to provide those to the county because we don't get to do a review. And these are a bunch of these, there are a bunch of these, what I term ministerial decisions that because it's the county and the county assessor that are receiving notice. If it's creating multiple lots, then we need to provide notice to our public safety people because first responders need to respond and it needs to be coordinated through 911, so they have an actual address. So that is an example where we would be involved, but combining multiple lots into one doesn't create any of those issues. And so there's just not a hook for the city. So what we can do, I mean, again, if the county did something wrong, that's, you know, I'd recommend that the interested parties inform the county of that. We can send a letter related to the Weeping Willow, but again, this is not a decision that we would normally be involved in, the combining of 2 lots.
Okay, thank you. Does that answer everything for you, Dan?
I think so, but who would I write to, the county manager on this issue, or how does that work?
Well, what I did is I looked up the lot line process, which I think was updated 2 or 3 years ago. And that has a staff member who was in charge of it. I can't remember that person's name. I looked it up about a month ago. But it kind of discusses all the written materials and evidence that needs to be provided. And then it does list the name of the staff member. So I think that would probably be the person to start with.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm sorry, but I've got to say that Alexis Everhart also wrote us a letter about moving the garbage can up there, Leslie Miller. And it was wondering if we could put in a dog washing station because they don't have one near the park and the beach. And they thought maybe it'd be a moneymaker for the fire department.
That would be a money maker for us.
I guess you
Put
would.
your quarters in before you get
I'm unsure, and I just thought I'd put that out there for. Okay, moving. Ordinance and resolution, second read, ordinance 945, an ordinance implementing cost recovery services in the city of Gerhart. I'll take a motion to approve 945, reading once by title only. This is the second read.
I move we approve ordinance 945 by second reading only.
A second?
I second it.
Any discussion?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
On page 5, it talks about non-line health safety fees. And talks about tree removal, for instance. So if our tree falls into the road, are you guys gonna charge for that?
Like I said, and the last one, probably not. This is like, if this is more vague, I don't even see me having that. It's probably more like a tree fell down, and cause the inability for us to respond to a 911 call. Again, that might not even go to you, it would probably be like your homeowner's insurance, but I don't see that even, honestly, that one, I don't see happening when we encompass it in here. to cover the basis, because this ordinance could be a long time, right? Who knows, what that would be. If someone doesn't properly take care of their trees or something like that, and we had multiple issues, most of the stuff is like, it wouldn't be, oh, this happened one time, remove your tree. This is, we've been out to your house 30 times to remove trees to get to your house. Now we need to see something, right?
Yeah, thank you.
Good. Any other questions? Anyone else? Chad? Like title only,
Yes, sir. I went ahead and rearranged my documents here real quick.
yeah, that's what I did at the beginning, I think.
Please note that. Thank you very much. Ordinance 945, an ordinance implementing cost recovery services in the city of Gearhart.
All right. Did you see how fast that was?
So we don't have to vote.
We have to vote.
Yes. But did you see how fast that was, the reading of it? Just asking.
Thanks.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. All right. Good enough.
Thanks, sir.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
New business. Anyone wishing to speak about new business has got a 3-minute comment level. Are there anyone wishing to speak?
Is there that old business?
That was the end of old business.
Nobody online, sir?
All right, so next we got audit compliance. Chat. Or Justine, I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay. So the auditors do prepare a report, they put it in the packet, and they do make recommendations. The state has now, we're encouraging and recommending, these auditors to help assist, to make sure that the council members are aware of, areas that could be improved. And that you do have, some form of action that you are aware of that the city is going to take. We are a very small organization. I worked for the school district for 26 years, and for 26 years, we had the same comment, and we were a lot bigger and had multiple people. But it just happens that when you have small organizations, that people wear multiple hats. So we have tried to put in, internal controls, within the organization with the auditor's help. The auditors also come and they review our internal, procedures and ask us questions every year to make sure that we are following things and not just giving them lip service. They actually want to see it documented. But the Secretary of State's Audit Division has asked them to help because apparently we were supposed to be submitting plan of action whenever you get deficiency. So they have provided a template for us. We have put our data in the template. And because organizational structure is our deficiency and we cannot hire more staff, we just try to be conscientious and make you aware and give you reports and encourage an open door policy if you have questions or improvements. And this is just a letter that goes to the state that we have thought about it and that we are aware. I should have put under recommended motions that there was, that there could be a consensus that you agree that the mayor, Chad, and I sign this letter and send it in. And that would be the city staff recommendation.
Is there consensus that we three can sign this letter so it can go in to the water caucus?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
The others.
to the state.
State
To the
of
state.
yes.
I'm sorry, yes, I'm jumped ahead one.
It goes to the state.
Yes, ma'am.
Tell the state about that, not the auditors. Kudos to you guys.
The state doesn't give out trophies.
Hopefully you just back off.
All right. That's our audit compliance. Submission of the water investment needs assessment to the legislative water caucus.
Okay, thank you, sir. Yes. So I don't know that I necessarily need to read through this entire front report. I think we're pretty well all up on that. This information was asked for by the Legislative Water Caucus of Oregon, and they take these priorities and look for where the communities are needing to spend money on their infrastructure. And then this can help with future grants. Also, them understanding the state of the state as it is from a city's perspective. So what Mark McFadden and his team and I did is we took the water investment needs that we had in our water master plan and took those out of the water master plan and put them into this document. So it was a little bit easier for you to disseminate. A couple of things that are not in the water master plan that are here is the project that has to do with the new filtration skid unit. That is not in our water master plan, although we have a note that when we do update that plan, which if we start looking at SDCs, we may need to do an update to that plan to make sure everything's accounted for. So we added the skid unit. And then another conversation that I had with Miss Sharon, she thought it would be a good idea if we prioritize these projects, which they were prioritized in the water master plan. But we would even like to adjust that a little bit. So I put this document together to kind of give you an understanding of what direction we were heading with these. What we're gonna do with this information is once the council looks at it and agrees that this is the direction the city should head, we're going to upload all of these projects onto the Oregon Water Caucus website so that these projects are accounted for the city of Gerhart, so that when, again, we do look to the future for grants and other types of help, we may be able to receive that if they do come up with funds. So the water investment assessment prioritization is the same information that is in the packet that you have, with the exception that the Marion Loop construction has been completed. So I put that at the bottom of this prioritization list. I will not add it in on the Water Caucus website, but that still leaves us with 5 other projects. And so we reprioritized the projects to better address the current needs. The Marion Loop construction has been completed, fulfilling critical fire flow requirements for the Gerhart House Resort and other areas. The remaining projects include the new filtration skid unit, Highway 101 pipe replacement, Hillilla Loop construction, membrane replacement, and reservoir cathodic protection anodes. So these actually take, they will rust. They're put into our water supply system to actually rust out and take that rust away from other equipment within our system. For example, these anodes are hanging in our water reservoirs, and those would rust out rather than the equipment that is holding the water, such as the expensive reservoir. So we replace those every once in a while, but they're doing really well. They don't need replacement anytime soon. So with that being said, is there any questions of the council?
So you just should change the priority of the.
We added the filtration skid unit and put that as one of our top priorities.
Instead of project 6 is project 1.
Correct. Yes, that was not set in a priority level in the packet. And that's when Sharon called and said it would be a good idea for us to prioritize them. So I did a better job of prioritizing them. They weren't prioritized in that package, so,
Okay,
yeah.
So what's the time frame on the new skid unit ideally?
TBD.
Well, I think that, the mayor, and correctly so, he really wanted us to spend the ARPA funds on this. Fortunately or unfortunately, we had a lot of situations happen recently that we needed to take those ARPA funds and put it towards projects that we needed right now. But the skid unit, is something that if we will need, regardless of what happens with our water rights. If we get water rights, it becomes even more important. Not sure of a timeline. It's about a $1.2 million project. So it would take some grant help. It would take a lot of reserve funds. I'm saying that we potentially could be a few years out of that. Once we get this information to the Water Caucus and we begin writing grants and seeing what monies are available, that may bring the project forward a little bit faster. I would like to say it would be within 3 years. But it is number one on our project list. And when the availability comes up, we will head in that direction. Availability of funds, excuse me.
So if it's like an out of the box skid unit, then it's less than 6 months. If it has to be customized, then it can take over a year to get it. So it depends whether we can, it depends whether one of their kind of plug and play units works or not. If it's custom, it just is more expensive, it takes a little longer.
And there's no engineering for this yet. So that's a whole nother project, and that could be 6 months, but the thing is, if one of our skid units goes down. For some reason, the filtration membrane gives out, we will not be producing our water. In any quantity that is going to keep us from buying from Seaside or Warrenton at a high rate. But I'll sell it to us. Well, they have to. They will have to. We have an agreement.
Yeah, and currently, one of the skid units is down because we were doing that pinning project. And so what Mark McFadden made sure happened is that we had plenty of water in our 2 reservoirs before we started. Brought that 1 skid unit down, leaves us 1 skid unit or filtration unit, filled for the water. So we're able to maintain this time of year, but if this was to happen in the summertime, it would be very difficult for us as well.
So is he gonna try and get that second skid unit back up before summer?
Oh, yeah, it should be. I think it's almost done now. I think they completed that project today, but I'm not
So
positive.
we have no backup, basically, except for what Terry said.
We have the 2 skid units.
Right.
If one goes down, we'll be in some trouble, but we'll be able to do some water filtration. If we had 3 with the current water rights, we would be able to take our skid units down individually for longer maintenance periods.
Right.
And do a better job of really maintaining that work. I mean, we're doing a great job now and it's all working fine, but it gives us a lot of security.
I'd like to work on the skid units at when.
Yeah, well, that's pretty well what they did when they filled up the reservoirs. Yeah. And there has been plenty of night work being done on these over the years. So with that, if the council doesn't have any questions, I will submit this information to the Water Caucus.
Can we have a consensus? All those in favor of doing that, say aye.
Aye.
No. Okay,
Thank you. And thank you, Dana, for your help with that.
council concerns. Dana,
I have actually just 2 things to say. Number one is, one thing that I forgot to mention in my beginning report was that we also do not have any plans to switch from a volunteer to a fully paid fire department. That is another, I don't know where that started, but there's a rumor going around out there that that's what we intend to do. And that's not the case at all. By putting bunks and considering bunks, all you have to do is look at what's going on down in California And what Andy just told us about people living in her house so that they can volunteer for us. That is the reason for throwing a couple of bunks into the project, if indeed we do. And then the other concern that I had was in response to Tim Mansell's letter. I think he had some valid points, and I don't want to reinvent the wheel, and I don't know that taking back the noise ordinance is what the people of Deerheart want us to do. But he had some good points, like if we were intending to control noise, is there a way that we could revisit that and allow landscapers to perhaps rake, or for plumbers to quietly come into somebody's house and do a project? If there was a way that we could look at it and prohibit the use of certain power tools or loud power tools, or look at the hours. And I'm just going to say that that is something I would be open to. And that's all I have to say.
Okay. Sharon.
Okay, I just wanted to make a comment about Stuart Schultz's insights and comments on the dune vegetation and maintenance of the dune vegetation. My thought about this was that what we are doing currently with the mowing of the Scotch broom is a means to beat the Scotch broom back. It is not an eradication process. We are not eradicating the Scotch broom by any means. And if the Gerhardt citizens think that we need to eradicate the Scotch broom, then we're gonna have to launch into a planting of bushes out there process. So.
All right. Alana.
I have a couple down here, but I think we've covered them in the bulk of the meeting already. I was curious about the bench program and where that sits.
Not very far. So we need to get back up on the bench program. I met with the Oregon Park and Recreation Department 3 weeks ago to start, no, excuse me, last week. Last week, just before the holidays, and to get that project back up and going. That has nothing to do with the local benches downtown, but we have pricing for the local benches in town to put cement structures in that can place benches on and screw them down. We have that quote, we have the bench quotes ready to go. As far as the benches that are out on the dunes, we need to finish our application with some more information that they want from us. Before they will, yes, to move them out above or to even keep them where they're at. There may be some issues with that, where we may have to remove them. So we need to get back up on that. It's just time. It's just time. But I think that this winter, we can get that going again and probably have the application and everything in there within about 2 months. With our timeline. And then we also have a request for another bench that just came in as well that we're working with Preston on, or we'll be working with Preston on for a family here locally in the park. So we're not as far as we'd like to be, but we need to just spend some time on it again.
I guess the other thing that I just spend a lot of time thinking about is, you know, we got that park done, the playground equipment is what I mean. It was donations and then it was some city money and in-kind donations, other things. And it just feels like we need to have a way of having building funds or something where we can give people a tax deed. I mean, I just wanna go, I wanna pledge, you know, whatever I can afford, few thousand, to the public safety building. To say, I'm behind it, I still am gonna have to pay, just like everybody else when we get the bonds. But I feel like we have to have potentially not knowing, what the cost of the project is gonna be. But I feel like we have to be out there saying, we need multiple funding sources, and I know part of what I learned when we went at the other project was until you have the public support, until we get that vote, you can't even go and try and get a bond. No, or not a bond, I mean, a grant. So we were looking up grants and looking, we got the big book of Oregon foundations, we're flipping through there, finding potential places, but you just go, well, wait a minute, we have to get the support of the city, of the citizens first. And I just think we need to have that kind of a structured financial goal that's not just depending on the residents. I don't know.
The taxpayer. I think that would be something that would be wise for us to discuss during the budgeting process, because if we were to receive funds, we would need to have already set up a place for those funds to be received and to be spent. So we would need a revenue and an expense. And there's been quite a few people that have talked about, selling bricks or the quarter machine at the dog wash station, all these ideas that we have. If people donate to the city of Gerhart, it is a tax write-off. So that's already okay, but we would need to set it up in the budget to be able to receive those funds. And I think that would be a good conversation during the budget season to accommodate for that. And then to maybe start talking about what that program would look like, whether it be selling bricks, naming of the fire station.
Yeah.
It enables somebody to buy a new flagpole if that's the decision, if we decide to do that, or to repurpose the flagpole or what have you.
I have to buy the whole fire station to get it named.
It's a great opportunity. Cochrane Station.
No.
Okay,
Throwing it out.
Cochrane Station, okay. Preston,
Well, I agree with a lot of it. I think that this council, Dan and I both agree. We have, and the chiefs, we have to have citizen participation. There's a group of people here at Gerhart that are absolutely opposed to anything this council does. We need to get the word out. Like I say, this next meeting on the 14th is gonna be probably the most informative that we're gonna have. And people in Gerhart need to listen to what the professionals have to say. Because that determines what the budget is gonna be, basically. Okay, so, everybody get out, talk to your neighbors. I'm over on the east side of the tracks over there, I've had people come to me and say, can you afford an extra $110 a month for your taxes? Well, where does that come from? My adage is, believe nothing of what you hear and only half of what you read.
okay, that's it,
That's it.
motion,
To adjourn.
second, okay. All those in favor say aye, we're not having a discussion.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. And I'm sorry I didn't give you a bio break at 8:30, but I was ready to get out of here. 5-minute bio break.
Sorry to hear
Yeah, come on.
that. Okay.
I worked on that house 2 years ago when he bought it. His first house.
I didn't
It's all
know that the
Dina.
town
Right up on the
involved
foothills of the
a lot
thing here.
more than just